Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the second grade Waldorf curriculum for live education. I also have some of the main lesson books that my children did that go along with this curriculum, and I'll show them to you as we go through this curriculum. So the first thing I want to show you is the size of this curriculum. This is a box curriculum, but it is not as big as what you would typically find. There's a lot of reasons for this, and as I go through the curriculum, I'll explain some of those things to you. Something that I did when I got this curriculum was I went ahead and put some labels on that said second grade, because not all of the books say second year on it. And as we have the complete curriculum from kindergarten to 8th grade, we were losing track of which books went with what grade, so I went ahead and did that. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is the Nature, Arithmetic, and Form Drawing book. This also includes an introduction to the second grade, and this is going to be important to overview the second grade child, what's going on in the child's life developmentally at that time. It's going to help you understand why the subjects have been chosen for this grade and why they are being taught in this way. So you're going to get an introduction for all the books, and it's of great value to read that first, especially if you're not familiar with the Waldorf philosophy, because it does go into some details about the philosophy and again why certain subjects are being taught at this grade. So this book also is going to outline all the books that come with the second grade year, as well as what the books contain. This book is also going to explain how to do the daily lessons, including the opening activity, the review, the main lesson, as well as the lesson activity. Now, these are main lessons rather than unit studies. So they differ from a unit study in that they are basically a concentration on a particular subject matter rather than including all different subject matters into a unit study. They're also different from the typical day schedule of traditional school in that you're not necessarily doing all the lessons for an equal amount of time throughout the entire day. However, you are pretty much reaching all different subject areas within a day, and I'm going to explain how you do that. Now, the main lesson typically takes up the bulk of the school day, and when the children get older, that could be up to 2 hours a day. For second grade, it's about an hour, maybe an hour and a half for the main lesson. Now, a main lesson will certainly include other subject areas naturally, but it's not a unit study. Where you're going to find other subjects are in the opening activities and in the review work and in other smaller daily lessons that run parallel to your main lesson block. Now, a main lesson can run anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. For this particular grade level, the main lessons are generally 4 weeks, and it's recommended that you break them up into 2 2-week blocks. Now, during that time when you're doing your main lesson, you're also doing your opening activities, and this book is going to explain how long to spend with your opening activities, and it also gives you some examples of what you can do for your opening activities. Typically, it may include reading a verse or a prayer. You can memorize a poem in that time. You can practice playing the recorder, which was introduced the year before. And of course, your daily math, which is really important and should be done on a daily basis. This book is also going to outline how to actually do your main lesson, which includes your review time, your main lesson presentation, as well as your lesson activity. Now, the review time is really important. It basically takes the place of tests and quizzes. The review time is an opportunity to revisit the material that was covered the previous day. Now, the 3-day learning cycle is something that is pretty standard in a Waldorf school, although it may differ from school to school and teacher to teacher. But basically, on the first day of a lesson, the new material is being introduced. And then on the second day, that material is being reviewed. Now, it may be reviewed in the form of a drawing, or it can be reviewed in other ways. On the third day, that main lesson is being reviewed again, but this time it can be reviewed in the form of a written narration. So that one lesson occurred over 3 days, but in that time, new lessons were introduced as well. So on the second day, while you're reviewing the previous day's lesson, you're also introducing the new lesson, so that by the third day, you're going to be doing possibly a written narration of the lesson you did 2 days ago, and a drawing of the lesson you did the previous day, as well as introducing the new lesson. The lesson activities generally can include something that you're drawing related to the lesson or written narration. And whenever possible, you can also include some other hands-on activities. Now, this particular curriculum comes with all of the material you're going to need in order to draw those lessons, as far as like the fables and the nature stories. All the source material is included, but you will need your main lesson books, which you can make or purchase separately, as well as color pencils or watercolors or both. And then for the additional things that you may need for this particular age group are a recorder or another musical instrument that's similar, and any handiwork materials like yarn and knitting needles or crochet. All right, this particular book also overviews how to do your block rotation, which are your main lesson blocks, and how to rotate them through the year, how to break them up into 2 different main lesson blocks for each of these different subject areas, which are subject areas that you may not find in a traditional school. They still will incorporate all of the subject areas that you're familiar with, like language arts, math, and science, and history, but it's done in a very different manner. And as we go through the books, then we can I can show you some of those differences. This book is also going to have an introduction on nature, arithmetic, and form drawing. So the science for this year is nature-based. It's the things that the child can see and experience. Your form drawing is going to be really important in a lot of the different subject areas. It's great for the preliminary penmanship skills, and it's also really great for concentration as well as different math concepts later on, like symmetry. So this book is going to overview the different science themes for the year and for the main lesson block. So it's going to go over like the water cycle and the 4 seasons, the formation of clouds, earthworms and soils, and other different topics. All right, so let's move on to some other parts of this book. You've got like your form drawing examples here, and then you have some of the math concepts that are going to be covered this year as well. All right, let's look at nature stories for the second year. This is going to have a lot of your science and form drawing and writing for the second grade student. So this is a really different way to approach these different subjects. They're going to all sort of be merged together. Here are some examples of the form drawing. I especially like this a lot. And it looks deceptively easy, but it actually takes quite a bit of concentration, which happens to be really good for students who have trouble concentrating. This actually is a really great exercise to help them focus and to concentrate. Now, these form drawings look like things that could be like maybe clouds or water or mushrooms or animals. And so these are going to complement the story, which is also going to have a science theme. So you can see that the form drawing is done on one side, and then you have your sentence that's done on the other side. Now, one thing to take note of here is that this main lesson book is considerably smaller in size than what is typically used in first and second grade. They would be quite a bit larger, which would make it a lot easier for the child to be writing with a crayon in general, with still the young grades, or with a really thick pencil. So these would be the crayons that would be used in second grade, and you can see that these stick crayons are easy to hold and they provide a really thick, wide print. So this is great for first and second grader. And of course, you're still going to be using the block crayons, which are great for making these borders right here. Now, this is a great age to begin transitioning into more typical sized color pencils and pencils, and so you may also choose to use these thick Lyra color pencils. And if you want to use a pencil instead, then I would recommend these pencils. They are also by Lyra, and they're nice and big, and they're also triangle shaped, which makes it really easy to hold. So those are a few of the materials that you can purchase separately in order to go along with this curriculum. So you can see that science has been integrated with language arts and has been integrated with art in the form of form drawing. So I really like the way that these subject areas have come together, not in a unit study, but more organically as the main lesson. The next book I want to show you is Nature Science and the Native American Legends. So something to take note of at this point is that the second grade student is around 8 years old, and 8 is a time where the child is still one with the world. There's not a big separation between the child and the animal kingdom and the child and the world of plants. And so this curriculum is going to be responsive to the nature of a child, and it's going to have a lot of stories about nature, animal fables, and the saints. And there are reasons behind this that I will continue to illuminate as we go through the curriculum. Now, the 8-year-old is still in an emotional phase, like a feeling phase, and is still again, one with the world. It's before the 9-year change where the self-awareness really begins to take shape for the child, and it's a time where there is a distinction between the child and the rest of the world. And that can be a very traumatic time for a child, and that occurs at around 9 years old, the 9-year change, which is pretty significant in the development of a child, but it's also significant within the curriculum because the Waldorf curriculum aims to be responsive to those different developmental changes, and you can especially see it with every grade. So this particular book is going to overview nature science, the Native American legends. It's going to talk about the fables, the different kinds of animals in these fables, especially in the Native American legends, because the animals take on different characteristics that are in some ways human characteristics, and in other ways you can see humans taking on animal characteristics. So one of the things that you're going to find in the Native American legend are the trickster, or the trickster animal. And the trickster tends to be either the coyote or the raven. So you're going to see that come up in some of the fables. Now, you're also going to have a source book that has animal fables. When we get to that, I'll explain some of the wisdoms behind teaching the animal fables, which is a little different than what you typically would think of when you're teaching, for instance, Aesop's fables. Okay, so the legends, the legends and nature science are going to go together in a really beautiful way. Let me get to lesson 1 so that I can better explain this. Lesson 1 is going to be about the North Star and the Big Dipper and the Great Bear. And this is going to be accompanied by a story of the Native Americans, how they interpreted the Great Bear, that constellation, and how the Great Bear got there. So your main lesson book, and this is also not a typical main lesson book. We made these quite a bit smaller. We bound them differently than the other main lesson books. We also want to use a lot of pastels, so we bound it ourselves with some paper in between the two sheets. So usually your books would be a little bit larger. But basically, we have the drawing of the Great Bear, and then the story behind it, which there is science behind it, but it's told through the stories of the Native American legends. So you're getting your science, but you're also getting it through a story, and at the same time, you're also learning something about the Native American culture. So you're also getting writing. So you're having the written portion here with the correct composition for the sentences, capital letter and ending with a period, and then again that form drawing that you did earlier is going to help you with your penmanship. And then you have your drawing and the science lesson, which is about astronomy in essence. But it's done in such a different manner. It's done through the feeling rather than through the intellect. And that's especially important for the elementary age student from the perspective of the Waldorf philosophy. All right, so this is the main lesson book that my son did at this age. He's got the writing on one side. Again, you have the borders around where you're going to do your written portion. I did write in lines here, but typically you wouldn't write in your lines. And if you're working with a larger main lesson book, you would probably write this with crayon rather than with pencil. And then we have all of the different artwork that coordinate with the different stories for this main lesson block. Okay, let's move on to teaching the Golden Legends. It's a two-part book. You've got how to teach this particular main lesson block, and then what's really fantastic is you actually have your source book here with pre-selected stories that coordinate not just with the curriculum, but also with the child and his age and development. So this is really great that you don't have to go and look for these sources elsewhere. It comes with the curriculum. So let's go over teaching the Golden Legends and what that entails with as far as like the curriculum. These will be lessons in arts, phonics, and cursive writing. Now the legends are of the saints, and what's great about this curriculum as well is that at the very beginning it actually goes in and explains the idea of using these stories, where the stories were gathered, and whether they're actually true or not. And it explains all that, and then of course you've got your main lesson on how you're going to use these. So are these stories true or not? Well, these were written down sometimes centuries after they happened, so certainly embellishments were going to happen, but is that important or not? And it explains from the perspective of not just the author, but from the whole philosophy perspective on whether those things are important or not. And that's for you to decide whether you want to include them or not. Personally, we included other stories other than the Golden Legends, but we still used the rest of the format for our main lesson book, and I'll show that to you in a minute. So this is going to be composition, phonics, cursive writing, painting, modeling. It has so many different areas included in this, but again, it's not a unit study. This is still a main lesson block. So you're going to have your introduction of cursive writing through your form drawing, which is fantastic. And then you're going to have your writing and composition related to the stories that were in this book here, this collection of Golden Legends. All right, so I want to show you how we did ours, which was a little bit different. We still had the composition and the writing, but we used different stories instead. Okay, so the way that we approached this particular lesson or this particular main lesson block was to go through these different lessons, and we went ahead and my son wrote them into his main lesson book, but instead of the writing coordinating with the Golden Legends, we chose other literature for him to write, and then we would find words within that literature or words within the work that he was writing, either an original narration or copywork or dictation, that coordinated with the words that he was learning on the for that particular lesson. And so we went through this for the entire main lesson block, and the thing is that he may have been in 3rd grade by the time we did this, because I noticed that we also did have some sentence diagramming, which was not part of the 2nd grade curriculum. But because at the time I was teaching multiple grades, sometimes some of the things that my older student was doing found its way into his work as well, and that would be a lot of sentence diagramming that made its way in, but it's not part of the curriculum at this age. All right, so this is going to go through different word families and different words, and again, the way that the written portion of this lesson is going to work is that it's going to coordinate with the stories that you are telling your child, and again, those stories are going to be in the source book that is provided in the curriculum. All right, so let's move on. Oh, and the artwork is really beautiful, and that is something that has been revised from the older curriculum, is that this one has all original artwork, which is really beautiful. All right, so let's move on to teaching fables. This will be lessons for animal science, grammar, speech, and poetry, and you will be using the animal fables from around the world for this, and you also have the legends of Buddha as well, which includes some animal fables as well as a nice mix of kind of a mixture of animal fables and the saints together, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. All right, so for this main lesson block, you are going to be having the fables, and you're going to have grammar, speech, and poetry. This is a really great way to bring those different subject areas together. You're going to start with a story, and then you're going to bring in the grammar into that lesson. So you've got your story, then you've got all of these verbs, for instance here. They're action words that would coordinate with the story that you talked about or that you deliver to your student. The thing is that these stories are meant to be orally told to your student as storytelling, not really read aloud. And the discussion that happens afterwards is a little different than the discussion that you may typically think of when it comes to studying these stories. It's more a matter of observation rather than dissection. So if you're telling a story about an animal, then you may then say, well, how did that animal move? And then you'll collect all of these different words that are verbs, and that would be part of your grammar lesson, rather than a more analytical and intellectual approach to that story, or even an analytical approach to grammar, in which you are breaking down the sentence structure into these different components. You're actually looking at this from the other perspective of looking at a story and then making an observation on that particular animal, and then from that drawing out your grammar. So I really like the approach. I think that it suits the child really well. And again, in this curriculum, you're going to find some beautiful artwork as well as a lot of nature poems that can work really well as the opening activities for this particular main lesson block. And then you have your animal fables, and these are from around the world, which is great because it's not just Aesop's fables. So it comes with a variety of fables. And the thing that's really great about the way it's suggested that you learn or teach these fables is that typically, especially with Aesop's Fables, for instance, the book that we have, it'll go through the fable, and then at the bottom it will have a little explanation to the story, the moral of the story. And this curriculum suggests that you don't do that, that you tell the story, but that you allow the story just to resonate with the child so that the child can come to his or her own conclusions rather than giving the answer in effect. I also like the way that it's explained in the curriculum. In one of the previous books, it basically says, how would you feel if somebody explained who you were to a third person, and in essence pigeonholing you into those particular characteristics before you even had a chance to explain who you were, or for the other person just to observe who you were and all your nuances and you know, in your whole special capacity, rather than being reduced to just a couple of definitions. And that's kind of the same way with these fables, in that the child then has his or her own opportunity to understand them on a deep level, because as soon as you give away the moral, you're really breaking the whole artistic nature of the lesson. So I really enjoyed being able to do that. You have to really catch yourself and not ask your child, so what was the story about, or what do you think is the moral? You really have to catch yourself from saying that, so that the child can really experience it to the fullest extent of that lesson. All right, the next book we have is The Legends of Buddha with Animal Fables. And I really like the way that this book kind of is a combination of the animal fables and the golden legends, the legends of the saints, because you're going to see this contrast from the fables and the golden legends in that the fables are going to have the animals are going to have human qualities that aren't always the best of human nature. And that's going to be in contrast to the golden legends where you have the saints, which are representing the best of human nature. So you're going to have that contrast, and then these tales are going to bring that together in a single story, so that you're going to have a situation in the story, in the tale, in which the animals are going to have to deal with that problem, which is going to be a lesson for humanity. So you're going to have the attributes of humanity in these animal fables, and then you're going to have the best of humanity in the tales of Buddha. So this is something, again, that you may choose to include in the curriculum, or you may choose to include other fables and other stories that you wish to have as part of the curriculum. While we had other stories in addition to this, we did go ahead and read these stories, and then my son did have drawings to coordinate with each of the stories, as well as a sentence or two that kind of summarized the story. And so this is what his main lesson book looked like. All right. So that is the second grade curriculum. You can see that it is pretty different than what you would typically see for second grade. You will still be going through all of your subject areas: math, science, history, and reading and writing. But you're going to be doing it in a really unique, different way. Your history is going to be more the Native American stories, as well as the golden legends and the stories of Buddha. Your science is going to be nature science. Your arithmetic is going to still be the basic addition and subtraction with an introduction to skip counting, which will be the first stepping block in understanding your times tables. And of course, you're going to continue with your writing and grammar, and that's going to be mixed in with all of these different stories. All right, so in addition to these books, you will also need a main lesson book, as well as some crayons or color pencils. We really like this set by Stockmar, and you can get the stick as well as the block crayons. We also have some color pencils, but for the second grade student, I would recommend using the larger ones by Lyra. And then we also have the larger pencil by Lyra, which also is really great for a younger student. All right, so if you have any questions about this curriculum, you can leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget that you can find more information about live education by checking the description box below.